Yes, I am excited. Just reading about Naomi, it just, you know, okay. So you think about the movie Hidden Figures, right? Naomi does not have a book named after her, but she is very significant to the story that of Ruth, really. And so I'm gonna, like Kalenda said, I am a teacher, so I'm gonna kind of set this up just like I would do in my classroom. So we're gonna have a first read. I'm gonna read the word, and then we're gonna go back and have a close read and just kind of dive in, okay? So I am in Ruth 1, and we're gonna read all of chapter 1. Um, so I am going to be reading from the New American Standard Bible this evening. Nope, let's do NIV. Let's do NIV. Right. So as you are listening and reading along with me, if there are any words that pop out to you, write it down, circle it, underline it, because if it did the same thing for you that it did for me, all of it will make sense at the end. Okay. So if you don't know who Naomi is she is a woman who kind of has a complicated relationship with God in this story. And I like to say that she's like a hidden figure in the book, because if you don't really read it, she kind of does get lost, but her story is really, really important. Okay. So in the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. The man was in oh Lord, nerves. Elimelech. His wife's name was Naomi, and the names of his sons was Mahlon and Chilion. They were Euphrates from Bethlehem, Judah, and then they went to Moab and lived there. Now, Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and when she was left with her 2 sons, they married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other Ruth, and they had lived there for 10 years. Both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husband. When Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had come to aid of his people by providing food for them, she and her daughter-in-law prepared to return home from there. With her 2 daughters-in-law, she left the place where she had been living and set out on the road that would take them back to the land of Judah. Then Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show you kindness as you have shown kindness to your dead husbands and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband." Then she kissed them goodbye, and they wept aloud and said to her, "We will go back with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I am too old to have another husband, even if I thought there was still hope for me. Even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, who would wait until they grew up? Would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters. It is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has turned against me." As at this, they wept aloud again. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. "Look," said Naomi, "your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods. Go back with her." But Ruth replied, "Don't urge me to leave you or to turn my back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me." When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. So the 2 women went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, The whole town was stirred because of them, and the women exclaimed, "Can this be Naomi?" "Don't call me Naomi," she told them. "Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me." So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, arriving in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was beginning. Okay, was a lot. Okay, so I don't know what words or might have stuck out to you, but as I was doing the study, here are some of the words that I've written down, or phrases. They went for a while to live in this country. I also have bitter. I have sweet. I have return and leave from me. And to me, a lot of us, when we are in those complicated seasons with God, we like to be alone and we over-identify with our circumstances. And here is what I see here with Naomi. She is grieving the loss of her husband, and then she's grieving the loss of her sons. And now she has the responsibility, in a sense, to care for her daughter-in-laws, because during that time, if you lost your husband and you no longer have men in your family to care for you, you eventually have to go to another male in your family to, in a sense, redeem the family. So she just wanted to be left alone. She didn't want anybody around, and yet she still realized that God was a provider by going back to a country or a place where she had heard he was still giving the people blessings. So let's go back to, we're going to go back and do our close read of the scripture. Okay. All right. So the book of Ruth shows how God's purposes are accomplished in the word. And we're also going to see how the unconventional and non-traditional circumstances, how they kind of took place and allowed for redemption to fall upon Ruth and Naomi. So in Ruth 1:6 here, when she said that she arose with her daughter-in-law so that they might return to Moab, for she had heard that in the land of Moab, the Lord had visited his people and given them food. So she departed from the place where she was with her two daughters-in-law, and they went on their way to return to the land of Judah, or Bethlehem in this other version. So although Naomi felt that God had deserted her or abandoned her, she still believed him to be a provider. So there are many times in our lives where we may go through things, and because of the circumstances, we feel that we identify with that circumstance. We may call ourselves lonely, depressed, or broke, infertile. There are many other words that we over-identify ourselves with. And in Naomi's story, I thought it was interesting that she changed her name herself, and it was not something that God had done. And typically when God changes your name in the Bible, it is because it is identifying you with your purpose. And here, she has changed her name to identify with her circumstance, her feelings. And a lot of times that's what we see ourselves or we see others doing. We identify with the circumstance instead of identifying with what God really called us or who he called us to be, our purpose. So going over back to Ruth 10, And they said to her, "No, but we surely will return with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Return, daughters. Why should you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb that that may be your husbands? Return, my daughters. Go, for I am too old to have a husband. If I said I have hope, I should even have a husband tonight and also bear sons. Would you therefore wait until they were grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, for it is harder for you than for me." And in the NIV version, it says it's much better for me than it is for you. So a lot of times God will assign people to us for certain seasons of our lives. And if we're not careful, most of us, we will try to send those people away. We don't realize how God is providing for us in that season. And even in her loss of losing her husband and her sons, he sent comfort to her. He sent support to her, and she was still trying to refuse it. And although one of her daughter-in-laws left, I could only imagine how that conversation kind of went when I was studying, and I really looked at it like a drama or like a play. And I could see the conversation going on between Orpha and Ruth about leaving their mother-in-law. Like, girl, she said she depressed, just leave her. And Ruth is like, "No, we got to stay." And at the first opportunity, Orpha actually did leave. I guess she realized, like, okay, you know what? She said, "Go, I'ma go. I ain't gonna be around somebody that don't want me around." But Ruth stayed because had it not been for that relationship being there, or I mean, all of it was necessary, because without Naomi and Ruth's relationship, we would not have the rest of the Bible that has unfolded. So we have to be careful about the connections that we have and how we turn them away. And we have to really ask for clarity and understanding as to why we're in certain seasons of our lives and why certain people are there. Because although it didn't seem as though Naomi could give Ruth anything, she really did sow into her. If you read more of Ruth's story, Naomi is the reason, or part of the reason. She's part of the purpose that she was able to meet Boaz. So we have to make sure that we are careful not to send God's provision away from us. Ruth 1:16. So, and that's where I was just talking about when she said, "Don't urge me to go away." So we don't want to send away our help when it comes along. Now, when it comes to thinking about Naomi again. So if you didn't know, her name really did mean sweet and pleasant. Okay. And for her to change her name to something where it says that it is bitter. So what I had originally titled this was bittersweet, because we don't realize many times how in the bitter moments of our lives, God is sweetening it up by bringing in certain things or certain people to help bring about the purpose that He has for our lives. We think that our place or our presence is insignificant, and it isn't. It isn't at all. I mean, I thought it was very interesting that although Ruth's story is only 3 chapters, or no, 4 chapters, and Naomi's presence in this is very, very important. And that's why I said I kind of see her as a hidden figure in this story, because of how the story unfolds. If we keep reading in Ruth, we'll see how there are certain standards or laws that were in place at that time. She had encouraged Naomi to go and glean in Boaz's field. And if you knew about Moabite women, she was a foreigner, and she had kind of groomed her to make herself known or noticed by Boaz. And that was her job. That was her purpose, was to connect those two together. Although she didn't know it, but that was her job. That was her purpose. So she needed for Ruth to stay around. She needed to be in Ruth's life so that she could help Ruth fulfill the purpose that she was put here on this earth to do. So her story, it just reveals God's promises for us and how his law, it is what it is, and how his protection is always there, because even when they went away, Boaz made sure that the two of them were taken care of. He had given her, and I know I'm kind of jumping all over, but I'm thinking about my time and everything, and I'm my my notes. But how when she went, he made sure that she had enough to take back to the woman that was taking care of her, and realizing that the only way that she was going to be able to know what she knew, it had to be from a woman from his country that knew the rules, that knew the law. And so even in that, they both wanted to respect the law, because he had even went and said, I'm not the one that you should be marrying. There's someone else ahead of me. And if they don't do it, then I'll be the person to take that responsibility on. But even in that, God's provision, his protection was there by when we are obedient and we do what we're supposed to do. Okay. So even when we don't know how things will end up, we can always trust that his promises are true. His promises are always going to be yes. He is always going to protect. He's always going to provide for us. Even when our relationship with him becomes complicated. Naomi's relationship was complicated with God because of the circumstances, but she did not give up on his word for her, that he was a protector, he was a provider. So she returned to the country where the provision was. So Naomi's bitterness turned into joy in the end. So at the end of her story, she ends up gaining a son-in-law who provided for both her and for Ruth. She also becomes the grandmother of Ruth's son, Obed. And then the women of Bethlehem say to Naomi, "Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer." And so that guardian redeemer was Boaz. He redeemed her family by buying all the property and also taking on her son's wife. So may he become famous throughout Israel. And this is what the women who are around are saying. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him. And this is in Ruth 4 and 14 and 15. So Naomi was no longer bitter. her life had became sweet and pleasant again because of that connection, that relationship that she had with Ruth. And so, as women, it is very important for us to have those godly connections, those women who will stick beside us and support us in those bitter moments of our lives. We often don't realize, or we take for granted those bittersweet moments or those transitional moments in our lives when it may seem like we're losing out on something. And sometimes our loss, it may seem like a loss because we may have to lose some things, but uh, we, or let me say it like I saw it. Sometimes we may have to lose things, or not necessarily lose it all the time. We may have to give up some things, and that's because God has greater for us. I am going through a transitional phase myself where I am having to um, possibly, not possibly, I'm going to have to make new friends and make new connections, and it's scary. And sometimes during those transitions, we want to be alone because we don't want anyone to judge us, or in a sense, sometimes some people, if they don't have the correct words to say, they can make it feel worse than what it is. But with the right people in our corner, with the right support, and just knowing who you can trust, it gets better. It gets better, and we know that in order to gain things, there might be some compromise and some sacrifices there. And even in that, we still have to continue to sow into others and stay in our word. So I really hope that I was able to encourage you all to not over identify with your problems or your circumstances. God is the only one who can change our name, and his promises are true. His protection is there. He will never leave us alone. And we need to be careful not to send the help that God sends to us away from us, because it is very closely related to our purpose. So I hope that I have done well.